Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a really fascinating, strictly impartial forensic examination of Lawrence Wilkerson's assessment. We're looking at a detailed analysis of an alleged 5-day Iranian logistics interdiction campaign against the IDF. Now, we aren't here to discuss the politics or offer commentary. Our focus is purely on the operational mechanics. We're breaking down the strategic architecture of this campaign exactly as outlined in the source material to see just how a modern military can be systematically paralyzed. So let's frame this up. When we talk about military logistics, you kind of have to stop thinking about delivery trucks just driving up to a front line with boxes of ammo. It doesn't work like that. Instead, Wilkerson's assessment describes it as the invisible architecture that every modern army depends on to breathe. It's the literal lungs of a military. Because modern armies rarely collapse from one big dramatic battle. Instead, that collapse creeps in through the back door when supply chains are severed. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll quickly cover the anatomy of the 5 phases, targeting the forward depots, the brutal supply arithmetic, the psychological and physical collapse, and finally, the limits of American resupply. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Anatomy of the 5 Phases. According to the analysis, this wasn't a random mirage. It was surgical. The campaign relied on hitting every single redundant pathway simultaneously to structurally eliminate 90% of the IDF supply routes. Hour 1, boom, precision strikes hit maritime imports at Ashdod, Haifa, and a Red Sea port, wiping out the vast majority of import capacity before the sun even came up. By hour 12, 12 major overland bridges and 9 rail lines were destroyed. Then they hit the secret depots, and by hour 48, cargo runways at Ben Gurion and Ramon were completely cratered. Now, you might be wondering, why not just fix the bridges? Couldn't Israeli or American engineers simply repair the cratered runways? Well, the assessment introduces this concept of sustained denial of repair. Basically, this wasn't just a one-time strike. It was a continuous operational condition. When engineers tried to perform emergency bridge repairs, or when vessels tried to approach Ashdod, follow-on strikes actively targeted the repair equipment and the personnel. It literally made emergency reconstruction impossible. Which brings us to Section 2. Targeting the forward depots. So forward depots are supposed to be the ultimate emergency safety net when primary supply lines fail. They are dispersed, they are heavily hardened, and their locations are among the most closely held operational security secrets in the IDF. But here is the staggering intelligence revelation detailed in the assessment. Targeting databases successfully located and struck 11 out of 14 of these highly classified depots. The intelligence implications of Iran knowing these exact coordinates are absolutely massive. So what happened to the other 3? The assessment notes the remaining 3 depots survived purely because of collateral damage constraints. They were in urban areas, so the strike package was intentionally constrained. But with 11 out of 14 destroyed, the countdown clock on the IDF's operational capacity plummeted. They went from having a massive safety net to literally just 3 to 7 days of available supply. Let's look at what that means on the ground in Section 3, the brutal supply arithmetic. We have to translate these strategic strikes into the brutal mathematical reality for the 120,000 deployed personnel. Pre-campaign fuel levels rapidly collapsed to just 40% surviving capacity. 60% was just gone. By day 5, fuel availability dropped below the threshold needed for offensive operations. This grounded the F-35 strike fighters, forcing massive reductions in sortie rates, and it left frontline armored brigades completely immobilized with empty tanks. To really put this into perspective, think about the staggering daily burn rates that make modern militaries so fragile. One single armored brigade consumes 180,000 liters of diesel a day. Air operations? They burn through 2.4 million liters of aviation fuel. Artillery battalions chew through 800 rounds daily. And those 120,000 personnel require 360 tons of food every single day. The math is just brutal. It highlights the absolute impossibility of sustaining thousands of tons of ammunition and millions of liters of fuel without functional supply lines. Eventually, the math catches up with you. And when the math catches up, things get dark. Section 4. Psychological and physical collapse. The analysis points out a really profound human truth here. Armies don't break just because of empty fuel tanks. They break psychologically. By day 5 of this campaign, commanders began officially reporting nutritional insufficiency. Now, that's a very clinical, polite way of saying 120,000 frontline soldiers were starving. They had completely burned through their 3-day emergency rations by day 4. And as the source material bluntly puts it, hungry soldiers make drastically different combat decisions than fed soldiers. Consider this dynamic, right? The physical reality of missing supplies is severe. Empty ammo crates, depleted medical stocks, it's terrible. But technically, it is survivable if soldiers believe help is on the way. Actually, scratch that. It's not even about survivability. It's about the psychological reality. When troops realize the ports are destroyed, the roads are impassable, and even the Americans can't get through, that's when organizational coherence dissolves. When the belief in resupply evaporates, the army breaks. Which logically leads us to Section 5, Limits of American Resupply. This brings us to what the assessment calls a geopolitical checkmate. You might be wondering, why couldn't the United States simply execute a massive emergency airlift to save the IDF? Well, the operational math simply doesn't work. A heavy-lift C-17 aircraft carries about 75 tons of cargo. The daily aviation fuel requirement alone is 2,000 tons. It would take 27 heavy-lift C-17 sorties every single day just to supply the aviation fuel. That physically exceeds the throughput capacity of the available American fleet. So it's not a lack of political will, it's just pure physics. Beyond just the physical lack of planes, the American response was structurally paralyzed by three massive constraints. First, insufficient throughput capacity, which we just covered. Second, a complete loss of receiving infrastructure. The primary airfields were cratered, and U.S. engineers couldn't repair them under the threat of those sustained follow-on strikes. And third, they faced a highly lethal, non-permissive threat environment. You simply cannot fly slow, radar-conspicuous cargo planes into that kind of airspace. This creates what is basically an ultimate, paralyzing circular dependency. It's a total catch-22. Massive cargo planes need fighter escorts to survive in hostile airspace, right? But to operate, those fighter escorts need the very air bases that Phase 4 of the campaign already eliminated. You can't bring in the cargo without the fighters, and you can't fly the fighters without the bases. The resupply mission structurally fails before it even gets off the ground. So, we're going to leave you with a really profound consideration raised by this analysis. How does the global balance of power shift when a superpower's military guarantee can be completely neutralized in just 5 days? And not by overwhelming troop numbers, but simply by the systematic dismantling of basic logistics. It fundamentally challenges every assumption on which modern strategic architecture is built. Definitely something to chew on as you digest these operational realities. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the explainer today, and we'll see you next time.